Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to discuss about the non-aligned movement, and this is the new topics for me and you peoples also. And study a hard talk about the national security and its parameters. And today I'll talk about the Nepal and non-aligned movement name. अब नेपाल र अन्य देशहरूसँगको नन एलायन्स मुभमेन्टको बारेमा आज म यहाँहरूसँग डिस्कस गर्न गइरहेको छु. खास गरेर नन एलायन्स मुभमेन्ट नेम. व्हाट इज द नेम? Okay, first of all, the non-aligned movement name. The non-aligned movement name emerged from the turbulent currents of the Cold War. यो चाहिँ कोल्ड वार पछि आएको हो. At times when the world was divided into two dominant camps, the United States and its alliances one side, and the Soviet Union and its alliance, its supporters on others for the newly independent nations, particularly those in Africa, Asia and Latin America. The global landscape was fraught with the challenges having the just skeletons of the chain of colonialisms. These countries were determined not to fall into the grip of a new kinds of the dominations, this time by becoming the pause in the global game between the superpowers. This nation faced a dominating choice: aligned with the capitalist West or the communist East. But many leaders in these newly sovereign states believes there had to be another way, a third path that would allow them to preserve their hard-won independence, foster their own development, and advocate for the global peace. As a result, the non-alliance movement name was formed in 1961 with the 25 founding members, including the Nepals, with the view of advocating the interest of the developing countries in the context of the Cold War confrontations. The idea of non-alliance was not just a political strategy, it was the statement of the intents. It was about charting a course that was either directed by the Washingtons or Moscow, but one that was driven by the needs, aspirations and values of these emerging nations. In short, the non-alliance movement's name is a group of the 121 states South Sudan joined in 2024 that are not formally aligned with or against any major powers blocks. It originated during the period of decolonizations that occurred after the World War II as a response to the bipolar division of the world into two rebel camps led by the United States and the Soviet Union. The newly independent nations that have joined these movements have asserted their independence and resisted the pressures and explosion attempts by the world's powers. After the United Nations is the biggest group of the countries worldwide. And what history and the evolution of the concept of the name. यसको इतिहास के छ, यसको हिस्ट्री के छ, र यो कसरी नेम चाहिँ इभ्यालुएटेड हुन पुग्यो त्यसको बारेमा पनि we'll discuss about it. After the World War II, the decolonization, numerous Asian and African nations sought unified movements to ensure peace, prosperity and security for all the countries. During these times, the world was split into the two major powers blocks, the USA and the Soviet Union, particularly after the establishment of the NATO and the Warsaw Pact. Many of these nations recognize the importance of the working together and coordinating without formally aligning with or against any of the power blocks. The term non-alliance was introduced by the Sri V.K. Menon in 1953 United Nations speech and later adopted by the Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru in his 1954 Colombo speech, where he outlined the Panchashil principles was forms the fundamental of the non-aligned movements. And this China Agreement of 1954 and Panchashil. The India-China Agreement of 1952, also known as the Agreement on the Trade and Intercourse between the Tibet regions of China and India, marked significant moments in the relationship between the two Asian giants. The agreement was negotiated in a context where both nations were emerging from the shadows of the colonialisms and imperialisms, India having gained the independence in 1947 and China have established the People's Republic of China in 1949. At the time, the agreement was held as a symbol of the new found friendships between the India and China. The slogans Hindi Chinese Bhai Bhai, Indians and Chinese are brothers, captures the spirit of these relationships. These agreements, which focused on the trade and intercourse between the India and China's Tibet regions, formally introduced the Panchashils or five principles of the peaceful coexistence. The Panchashil or five principles of the peaceful coexistence were formally introduced in the 1954 Agreement on the Trade and Intercourse between the China-Tibet region and India, reflecting both governments' decisions to the following principles: mutual respect for each other's territorial integrity and sovereignties, non-aggregations, non-interference in each other's internal affairs, equality and mutual benefit, peaceful coexistence. Panchashil was just a diplomatic tool, but was deeply rooted in the ancient cultural and philosophical traditions of the both India and China. The historical ties between these two civilizations, particularly through the sphere of the Buddhism, laid the groundwork for these principles. Panchashil becomes a part of the 10 principles of the international peace and cooperation outlined in the Declaration of the April 1955 Banking Conference, which involves the 29 Afro-Asian countries. Banking Asia-Africa Conference in 1955. The Banking Asia-Africa Conference was the first generation of the post-colonizing leaders attending as the conference. It marked the first large-scale meeting of the Asian and African states, most of which had recently gained independence from the colonial rules. The central idea of the name was formed in 1955 during the talk at the Banking Asia-Africa Conference in Indonesia. The conference had 29 participating countries, including the Nepal, spanning the 1.5 billion peoples, which accounted for the 54% of the global population. The Banking Conference was held by the countries wanting to avoid the Cold War's ideological conflict and focus on their independence struggles and economic growth. The three key decisions is Banking Conference, the role of the Third World in the Cold War, decolonization of the countries under the colonial occupation, economic developments, a 10-point declaration on the promotion of the world peace and cooperation, also called the Bandung's 10 Principles of Bandung Declarations, was adopted unanimously in the conference. These are now the principles of the NAM. During the 15th Ordinary Sessions of the United Nations General Assembly in 1917, a new African and Asian countries were admitted. Key figures in the process of included Jawaharlal Nehru of India, Jamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt, Khabu Nkrumah of the Ghana, Ahmad Sukarno of Indonesia, and José Bruno Tito of Yugoslavia. These latter becomes known as the founding fathers and iconic leaders of the movement. This conference symbolized the rise of the Third World as a significant force in the international politics, advocating for justice, equalities, and peaceful coexistence. First summit, held on 1st to 6 September 1961 in the Belgrade, Yugoslavia. 25 countries, including Nepal, attends the first summit. It has been called the Third World's ELTA. establishing a parallel to the Alta Conference and that brought together the Churchills, Roosevelt and Sultans. King Mahendra participated from Nepal. The conference was mainly driven by the effects of the decolonization, notably the rise of the newly independent African state won the world stage in the 1960s. It marketed a formal establishment of the name, positioning it as a significant bloc of the states that brought to maintain independence from the influence of the superpower. The conference led to the groundwork for the name as a government advocating for the peace, disarmament, and economic cooperation among the developing nations. The Alta Conference of the 1945 was a significant meeting between the leaders of the Alliance powers during World War II. US President Franklin D. Roosevelt, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and Soviet Prime Minister Joseph Stalin. The conference took place in the Livada Peace Palace near the Alta in Crimea. It resulted in the formations of the UN Security Council with the 5 permanent members with the veto powers. Some other outcomes also include the Soviet entry into the war against the Japan's reparations from the Germany and so on. Recently, in the 19 NAM summit was held in the Kampala, Uganda, under the theme of the deepening cooperation for the shared global influence. Members in criteria for the name. अब के मेम्बर्सको क्राइटेरियाहरू के छ यो नेमको चाहिँ हामीले क्राइटेरियाहरू के पूरा गर्नुपर्छ त The country should pursue an independent policy based on the coexistence with the different political and social system and commitment to non-alignments. The country must consistently support national independence movements. The country should not be part of the multilateral military alliance tied to major powers conflict. If the country has a bilateral military agreement with the great powers of the belongings to regional defense pact, it should not be connected to the major powers conflict. If the country allowed its region military base, this concession should not be made in the context of the significant power conflict. NAM members countries. Who are the NAM members? At present, there are 121 members of the NAM. South Sudan recently joined NAM and became the 121th members. There are 27 observers in the NAM, including the 7 state-owned and 10 organizations, the United Nations, African Union, Arab Leagues, and Organization of the Islamic Cooperations are among the organizations and countries with observers status. Some of the South Asian members are India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar, and Afghanistan. Yes, Russia and China are the observers of the NAM. Azerbaijan and Belarus are the only European nations that are members of NAM, and every African countries, with the exceptions of the Western Syria, is the part of the non-alliance movements. The countries of the NAM represents or nearly 2/3 of the United Nations members and 55% of the world populations. Principle of NAM. What are the principle of the NAM? The principle of NAM, known as the Bandung 10 Principles, were established during the 1955 Bandung Conference. These principles encompasses the element from the United Nations charters and 5 principles of the peaceful coexistence, respect for basic human rights, and the principle of the United Nations Charter, respect for the sovereignties and the territorial integrity of all nations. IP recognition of the equalities of all peace, race, and nations, regardless of the size of the stance. IP non-interference of the other countries, respect for each nation's right to defend itself in the accordance with the UN charters, advance of the using the collective defense agreements for the benefit of the major powers, refraining from the pressing of the using force on other countries, rejection of the aggregation of the use of the force against by the nation sovereignty, resolution of the international disputes through the peaceful means, promotion of the mutual interest and cooperation while upholding just and international obligations. यहाँहरु सबैलाई धेरै धेरै धन्यवाद छ र हाम्रो आगामी क्लास पुनः हुनेछ।